All right, well, Rodger, let's kick things off. For those of you who are not aware, Rodger and his partner Chris were out at the Super Bowl, covering it for, as part of the media. Rodger, I talked to Chris about this last week when he was filling in for you in Colony, but I want to get your take on the experience of being a media member at the Super Bowl.
Well, it's my third Super Bowl, and I'd have to say it was our best Super Bowl, just because we were in the right spot at the right time on getting Tom Coughlin after the game was over on the field, so that was a lot of fun. But we had 2,000 media members that were there, so it is when the game ends and the gate goes up and we're allowed to go onto the field. Can you imagine like 2,000 media members just all running out there with cameras and tripods, everybody trying to get an interview and then get it turned around in time for the newscast? But it's a fun experience. Media Day is a lot of fun. It's more work than I think most people think. They think, oh, you're at the Super Bowl. It's a great time. It is, but they do work you pretty good out there. And the right team won for me.
Absolutely.
I mean, the Giants said, we'll be back here to train, and that's 2 Super Bowls now, John, that I've covered the Giants. And what great endings to both of those games, with the David Tyree catch 4 years ago, the Manningham catch at the 50-yard line this year. I mean, you couldn't have asked for 2 better Super Bowls to cover. So it is a lot of fun. It was a great experience, and the fact that I worked with the NBC affiliate was a big part of it too. 111.3 million viewers on NBC for the Super Bowl. That's a lot of eyeballs on the Super Bowl. And then we had a show that was at The View? Right after the Super Bowl. Kel, was The View, right? Is what it's called, The View? Right after the Super Bowl. The Voice.
Close.
The Voice, close. The Voice, I guess, still had a big audience, and then we went on right after that show was over with our late news at like a quarter after 11, and we were on the field for all of our live shots when the game was over. So I got on the field just as Tom Coughlin was coming off the podium after he was done with the NBC network stuff, and that's when we ended up getting an interview with him. On the way, as they were sending him into the interview room on the field, we were able to weasel our way in. Chris Honorata was knocking a few people over with the tripod and the camera. And then the fact that they trained here, John, gave us a little bit of an edge, because he knows who we are. So he actually identified us and said us by name and actually answered a question as he was walking off the field. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I mean, the cool thing for the Capital Region is now you have, for the second time in 4 years, you have the Super Bowl champions coming to training camp next year.
They're going to be here. I mean, John Mara said it when he was at the Super Bowl. We asked him, and he said, I've given the university my word. I've given the mayor my word that we will be back. I don't know for how long, but I would expect at least a couple of weeks, maybe more, right around the end of July. So that's going to be great, right? End of July, you get the Super Bowl champions here.
And Rodger, we're going to have to iron out, we're going to have to get someone from the Giants, whether it's, we got our guy, or we got to get somebody and do Barstool Banter with us.
A Thursday night Barstool Banter somewhere with a member of the Giants.
Absolutely.
How about that?
I'm in.
Huh?
I am in.
We gotta put the full court press on now to make that happen in July.
Yep. Pat Hanlon would be a good guy.
Pat Hanlon's our guy.
Very outspoken guy. For those of you who don't follow Pat Hanlon on Twitter, he says some pretty intense things, considering he's a PR guy. Some controversial things.
He does. I think some things. I think a little while ago the organization said, Pat, please, can you tone it down just a little bit on Twitter? So, but yeah, it'll be fun this summer. And of course, over at the University of Albany, they've just announced the construction of a $24 million multi-purpose facility on the campus for football and for track and for soccer. So
now, do you think that new facility will? Part of the reason they're doing it is in hopes that they'll be able to bring the Giants back and sign another contract?
I think so. I think it would help the Giants. Whether that ends up happening, I don't know. But the other thing is, John, those facilities are so awful over there. I mean, they've been the same since 1960. And the football field is a glorified high school field. And they just needed new facilities. But they also needed the money. And they got $18 million from the state. And it's a $24 million project. They have $6 million in private funding that they're working on with fundraisers, and they're going to get there. And it's going to seat 7,500.
That's
so. And Bob Ford, a 42 years at that school and the architect of the program, he kind of deserves that. So I hope they attach his name to it in some form.
I mean, and that should also help their recruiting when you have a facility like that to show the kids that are coming through the building.
No doubt. No doubt. Because Bob Ford told us yesterday that when they brought recruits in, they talked about the academics. They took them to the new weight room. They took them to the new locker room facilities. The last thing they showed them was the football field.
I bet. All right, well, anything else for the Super Bowl before we move on?
No, it was, but already I'm seeing the Las Vegas odds makers have the Giants as 15-1 to repeat as Super Bowl champions. I'm hoping they do, because next year I could go to New Orleans.
Or at least get in there, right?
Or at least get in there. I mean, they don't have to win, just get me there. And then in 2 years, they'll be in New York. Indy, by the way, did a phenomenal job with the Super Bowl. Let me tell you, if you've ever been to Mardi Gras, this was Mardi Gras. This was downtown Indianapolis in a 5-mile radius. Picture this, 900,000 fans walking around the streets of Indianapolis in a 5-mile radius, everybody drinking a beer. You could take beers out on the street. You could take a mixed drink. I could pour myself a gin and tonic in a restaurant, put it in a cup, take it out the door, and walk down the streets of Indianapolis. And there were 900,000 people doing that on Friday and Saturday night, leading up to the Super Bowl.
Well, maybe I should have gone out even though I didn't have a ticket.
It was so fun. If you were able to get a hotel room, you didn't have to walk anywhere. You didn't have to drive anywhere. Everything is walkable distance in Indianapolis. So you park your car and you walk. Now, unfortunately for us and our crew, we were 30 miles away in Lebanon, Indiana, because even though we got credentialed media-wise, we did not get a hotel room in Indianapolis because they ran out of rooms. So we got shortchanged there, and we had to stay at a Holiday Inn Express out in Lebanon, but it worked out. It worked out fine.
All right, well, that sounds like an awesome time. Maybe next time the Giants are in it.
I was hoping you were going to get there.
I know, and we tried, and I told you, Rodger, we found the cheapest tickets we could find were like $2,800 a ticket for the upper deck in the corner of the stadium.
It's crazy.
And, you know, thinking back on it, maybe I should have just gone out for the weekend and found a bar over there to watch the game in, but next time.
You could have found a room at the Holiday Inn Express for you.
All right, well, moving right along, this is probably one of the hottest topics of the week, maybe the past week and a half, 2 weeks. I mentioned his name 3 weeks ago, or last time we were here in Troy. No one would have known who he was, and I would have had no reason to even mention his name. Obviously, we're talking about Jeremy Lin, Linsanity.
I mean, I didn't know who he was, to be honest with you. And then I found out that he was cut by a couple of pro teams. He was in the D-League. Knew he was looked up the stats. He was a good player at Harvard, but I don't think there was any person who covers the NBA. And I've had a number of NBA beat writers on my radio show in the morning, and honestly, they all are like, I have no idea where he came from. Well, they know where he came from, but they would never have predicted this. Never. And last night you had that, and then you had Jimmer in the house last night.
Yeah, so that was an interesting game. I know a lot of...
Sacramento is terrible.
Yeah, well, I think they said they had 3 road wins this year. And you kind of saw why. I mean, the Knicks had them pretty much handled. It was a 20-point game the whole way, pretty much.
Here's the key for Linsanity and the Knicks. He's revitalized the whole Knicks program and the whole team this year. What happens, I think maybe as early as tomorrow night, you got Carmelo Anthony coming back into the lineup.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. They got to work him back in. I think last night they started. Who the heck started in place of Carmelo? Was it?
I don't recall, but I know one thing. When Melo comes back, he's going to want his shots.
And he said, you know, at the end of the game, who takes the last shot, you or Lynn? And he said, I still want to take the last shot.
You know what? It'll work as long as he understands that the offense now starts with Jeremy Lin. He'll still get his shots, but as long as he understands that the point guard is where that offense is now starting. Yeah. And this kid fits right into Mike D'Antoni's style, right into his style.
And you saw, I mean, if anyone saw the game last night, unfortunately we don't get it at home, so I had to go out. I was actually in Rotterdam last night watching the game. And the way he played now that Stoudemire's back, I think this is how he has to play going forward. He only scored 10 points, but he had 13 rebounds. I think he had 4 or 5 alley-oops. He had a number of plays where he drove the lane and then dished out for the 3.
13 assists was a huge number.
And he didn't even play most of the fourth quarter because they were up by 20 points. So that's how he's got to play going forward. And he'll get guys looks. I mean, the guys around him just love playing with him because he's giving everybody slam dunks. I mean, Landry Fields had 2 alley-oops.
And then my lead story tonight, I'm sure word has gotten out now. We're looking for some reaction nationally for this story, but if anybody who didn't hear yet, you follow baseball, Hall of Fame catcher Gary Carter passed away at 4 o'clock this afternoon at the age of 57 after a really short bout with brain cancer, a malignant tumor that they discovered last May. And that quickly, they thought maybe a couple of years he could last, and he passed away today at the age of 57.
Yeah, and Rodger, I mean, you know, I'm a big Met fan, and Gary Carter was one of my favorites growing up. You know, I grew up in the 80s, and I don't really remember him too much being on the Expos, but I remember him, you know, what he did for the Mets and the leader he was, the kid they called him. It's, you know, it's too bad things like this, you know, it happens, but 57's too young. He was a good guy.
Great guy. I did interview him a couple of times, and always had a smile on his face. Fans really loved him. A couple of decades worth of playing time with what the Mets, the Expos, I believe San Francisco was in there, and the Dodgers were in there, all of those teams. But he was, they said he was, you know, tried to be in great spirits all the way through this and battled this right to the end. But it all ended for Gary Carter this afternoon at the age of 57. Now, the game that's on right now are the Rangers. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
What happened? Is that real? Is that really the score?
That is. Blackhawks up 3-0 on a Ranger team that's
5 minutes into the game.
Yeah, Rangers are the best team in the NHL right now.
Is Lundqvist playing? Is anyone watching the game? Slade, is Lundqvist playing?
Lundqvist should be in goal. He's not?
All right, well,
that's the problem. Rangers have won 4 in a row and like 8 of their last 9.
Yeah, and Lundqvist has been playing out of his mind. He just shut out Boston a couple nights ago, who was the second best team in the Eastern Conference. But, you know, here's a test where you're taking on a Western Conference team who's, you know, a good team.
Yeah, I mean, they're probably due to get whacked. And they're getting whacked right now, down 3-0.
But anyway, it's you know, it's for hockey fans in the area. I know there's a lot of Devils fans up here.
There's a ton of Rangers got more fans than anybody up here.
So, yeah.
Yeah, the Rangers are unbelievable. The Ranger fans.
So you know, it's good to see them relevant again, and hopefully they make a run at the Stanley Cup this year. I was talking to someone the other day. They are still having a lot of trouble scoring on the power play. We actually had a ranter last week that was talking about this. Ironically enough, they scored a power play goal while he was ranting. But what I told him was, hopefully, you know, every team has a certain number of power play goals they're going to score in a year, and hopefully the Rangers are just saving theirs for the playoffs.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, listen, it's too bad that the Rangers are playing so well. They deserve some back page in the New York Post and the Daily News. Unfortunately, Lynn Sanity comes along, and they steal he's stealing every back page and front page, really, of the local tabloids in New York. Otherwise, it would be the Rangers, because they're the best team in the NHL right now, and a lot of Ranger fans are hoping that maybe this is a Stanley Cup year.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit, obviously, they haven't lost a home game in like 14 home games, so they're a top team in the NHL as well, and that, you know, if the Rangers could get that far, you know, that's probably the opponent they're expecting, at least, to meet up with at the end, but still, obviously, a long road ahead, and it's nice to have that #1 seed locked up, but that doesn't mean anything. So.
Are we ready for some spring training baseball? That starts next week. I think the Mets, the Yankees, and the Red Sox
Tuesday.
all open up spring training for pitchers and catchers. I'll be very surprised if the Yankees open up spring training in Tampa and A.J. Burnett is on that team. It looks like he is going to be traded, John, sooner than later here, and it sounds like it could be to the Pirates.
Yeah.
Although there's a couple other teams that are showing an interest.
Well, I mean, he has a no trade. He told the Yankees that he will not go to a West Coast team. I guess the story is that his wife has a fear of flying, so he didn't want to play anywhere. I think she's originally from Baltimore. And he said no teams on the West Coast. He wants to stay on the East Coast. But, you know, Pittsburgh is East Coast, and we'll see if any other teams step up to the plate. for him. But
I hope it's Pittsburgh, because I actually think if he goes someplace else and there's less pressure, some people just don't thrive in New York. And I think A.J. Burnett obviously is one of those. I mean, he had a good year. He's had some good games. I still think he has some pretty good stuff, but it hasn't worked out for him in New York. I think it still could work out for him. Like if he went to Pittsburgh, it wouldn't shock me if he pitched great in a Pirate uniform and a lot less pressure.
And let's be honest, the Yankees are still going to be paying a majority of his contract.
Correct.
So,
correct.
As a Pittsburgh fan, you know, it's not.
Be fine by me.
That's not a bad thing to hope for.
No. All right. How about our locals, John? What do you think about Siena U Albany now? Home stretch of the college basketball regular season. Almost time for the MAC tournament and the America East tournament.
Before we get to that, we have Saturday, the exciting bracket buster Saturday. I know. Albany has to take on Rodger.
Yeah, that's at
They're
SFQ.
home, right?
Yeah, that's FQ and Siena on the road at Hofstra.
Yep.
And I don't think either head coaches, Will Brown or Mitch Bonnegier, are thrilled about it.
Yeah, well, you know, Hofstra's not an easy place to go in and play. They are, you know, they came off a nice win against Manhattan. Siena seems like they're a different team when they're home. They've knocked off Iona at home. They've knocked off Fairfield at home. They've now knocked off Manhattan at home. But they go to those teams and they have trouble winning on the road.
They've been very good at home, and a nice win against Manhattan. The problem with the bracket buster game is unless you are on television for a mid-major program, it's just a meaningless game. And I don't think either of these two coaches are thrilled about playing it, to be honest with you. I mean, Will Brown's team is all beat up. I mean, first of all, Gerardo Suero, one of the best players on, the best player on that team and one of the best players in the conference, maybe the best player in the America East. He's got shingles. I doubt he's going to play on Saturday. Logan Aronhold has a bad knee. Probably won't play him on Saturday because the game is meaningless. And Luke Devlin injured his knee yesterday. I don't know what the status is.
That didn't look good.
That didn't look good. No. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, I don't think either one of these two head coaches are thrilled about the bracket buster. And the other thing about the bracket buster is, as a mid-major program, in the conferences that they're in, you're not going to get an at-large bid. So really, what does it make any? It doesn't make any difference if you win or lose that game.
Yeah, I mean, it could help your ranking if you win the tournament, if you win your conference tournament, for instance.
Iona is a different story.
Yeah, yep. I'm thinking back to 2008 Siena when they very impressively beat Northern Iowa, and then they wound up getting the 9 seed when they won their conference tournament and took on Ohio State in the tournament. But you know, you have to be in Iona, who's leading the MAC, and have an impressive win on national TV for really to have any effect on your season.
But you know, I hope both those teams do well. I think U Albany can win a quarterfinal game and get to the semifinals this year if Suero is ready to play in Hartford, and you'll see what Siena can do. I think, you know, over just all things considered, Mitch Bonnegier and Siena, they've done a nice job, and they've been a really good home team. And John, the fans are still turning out. I mean, they're still averaging a lot of fans. I mean, the other night against Manhattan, there were 5,800 fans.
Yeah, I was there myself.
You know,
I think it's a nice crowd.
It's a nice crowd, and I think the fans realize that this is a team that's a little short-handed, and yet they're really giving it their all. And guys like Evan Himes has had a really good year, and you know, OD's playing well, and you know, I think the fans have been okay, even though they're under 500 and all of that. I think the fans are still supporting Siena this season, and hopefully next year they'll be a lot better.
Yeah. And you know, when you see Siena with some of these impressive wins, you know, the comeback against Iona and the pretty, you know, they beat Fairfield at home pretty single-handedly. You have to at least like a possible chance of them upsetting a couple games in the MAC tournament and making a little run. The key for them is to stay out of that bottom 4. They don't want to play in the first round.
They don't want
to win 4 games in 4 days.
That play-in game they are desperately trying to avoid, and right now they are ahead of Niagara, but not by much. Right. And they only have 2 games left. They got to go to Marist, and they have Canisius at home.
Yep. Canisius has 1 win in the MAC.
Yeah,
Marist has 3.
The Poughkeepsie game will be tough on the road, because they only have 1 road win, and that 1 road win for Siena, and they won at Canisius. That's their only conference road win. So they got to go to Marist. If they could get that, I think they'll beat Canisius at home, and then avoid that play-in game. That's the whole key right there.
Yeah, 3 games in 3 days is doable.
Impossible. Yeah, well, 4 and 4 is impossible, right? Yeah.
Well, except for the 2001,
except for the year
2002.